Within the lands of Heathmoor, there are countless tales of ancient heroes, and, of course, there are those that are a bit more dark. Well, traveler, it seems that you have been journeying far. Night has fallen. Please, join me around the campfire. Warm yourselves. Relax your bodies, for they are weary from travel. I have just, as a matter of fact, finished tuning my lute. I happen to be a wanderer myself, as a matter of fact. And I have quite a few tales to tell in this dark, cold night. So please, grab a seat and prepare yourself for the legend I am about to tell. It is the tale of suffering, of redemption, and it is the tale of a man who you yourself might have known while traveling throughout this province of the Mire. For indeed, the tales of the samurai are full of the dark and the gruesome. So please, sit down, relax, and let me tell you the legend of Oyamatsu Fuyuhiko, the possessed demon. Long ago, in Heathmoor's ancient past, a man named Oyamatsu Kikuchiyo, a devout priest of the mire, sealed away an ancient yokai within a great tree. Knowing that it would only be a matter of time before the yokai would return, he built a garden and a house around the great tree and settled his family in that very manner. A town would eventually grow near their estate, and the people who lived there called the town Yamamachi, in honor of the surrounding mountain range. And they named the Oyamatsu as their ruling clan. As the ages passed, the Oyamatsu family would continue to guard their ancestral land and their people as they maintained the secrecy of the sealed yokai's existence. Fuyuhiko would be born into the Oyamatsu family as the eldest of 4 children, 2 sons and 2 daughters, to the clan head, Oyamatsu Hojitaro, and his wife, Honoka. Fuyuhiko and his siblings, once they were old enough, began to train under the tutelage of their parents, their instructors, and their extended family. And, for many years, all was well. This, however, was short-lived. For while the people of Yamamachi prospered, danger was creeping upon the samurai of the mire. Several years after he finished his training as a Kensei under his father, the Vikings would sweep across the mire in the Great Raid, and in the resulting battles that followed, Fuyuhiko would be the last of his family left alive. Fighting a desperate last stand at his clan's estate, he would be seriously wounded and pulled back by his men, who advised him to retreat, only to get cut down by the invaders while trying to save their lord, as the residents around them burned in a raging inferno. As the fighting continued, a heavy snowstorm fell upon the town, mixing in the air with the scents of blood and flames. The Vikings would keep pushing until Fuyuhiko and the last of his guards would be pushed to the courtyard where the great tree now stood. Soon, the Vikings broke through the heavy gates to the courtyard, and seeing his men getting cut down in the dire situation, Fuyuhiko committed a terrible act of desperation. Struggling, he crawled to the tree and weakly stood up on his feet for just enough time to pluck but a single fruit from the tree before collapsing onto his knees from exhaustion. As the invaders began to surround the lord and his remaining guards, he opened his menpo mask and consumed the fruit. Suddenly, an uncontrollable power surged within him as his mind began to grow heavy and dark, and he lost consciousness, the once slumbering yokai reawakening from within him and possessing his body, which stood up on its own, wielding his nodachi in his hand. Standing in the frigid snow-covered and burning courtyard, the battered, seemingly dead lord suddenly attacked with an aggression like that of a feral beast, cutting down not just Vikings, but also some of his own remaining guards in a storm of blind rage and madness. With the sounds of blood spilling onto the ground, screams echoing in the air, steel clashing against steel, and fire raging around him, the possessed Fuyuhiko saw every person in sight as a potential kill, and he mercilessly slaughtered everyone he could in the chaos. As the courtyard fell silent, for a moment Fuyuhiko regained consciousness and wrestled back control of his body from the yokai. Now conscious Fuyuhiko stumbled through his burning home and exited through the front door. He stopped and stood, stunned, as he observed the carnage in front of him. Slain warriors from both sides dotted the landscape, his ancestral home and its town burning to ash, and clouds of smoke blocking out the night sky while snow fell across the land. He slowly approached one of his dead men and fell to his knees, his sword clattering to the cobblestone ground as he gazed at his men, now lifeless, laying slaughtered at his own feet. Suddenly, visions of what occurred while he was unconscious flooded his mind. Looking down, he sees his body and his sword practically drenched in blood. His body began to shake uncontrollably as his mind raced and his eyes began to well up with tears. Feeling a wave of loss and helplessness that overwhelmed him, he found himself struggling just to breathe. Looking up to the sky, covered by smoke and dark clouds, unable to hold it in, he unleashed a powerful cry of despair that echoed across the surrounding land. From the streams and rivers, the mountains and the hills, his cry pierced through the sounds of war surrounding him. He fled. He had nothing left but his life now. He knew that if he perished here, he wouldn't be able to avenge his clan, but that also, his body could become fully controlled by the yokai now residing within him once more, and could go on a rampage that could kill an untold number of people. So he retreated to the heavily wooded mountain range outside of the town. As he began to look back, once more, a grim expression of terror and loss still on his face, he disappeared into the shadows of the forest. And to the other samurai, who could see the smoke from far away, this signaled the start of the Great Raid and the seeming annihilation of the Oyamatsu family. The Great Raid tore apart the samurai of the mire. The burning of towns, villages, and castles, and even the imperial palace was not spared, as the Vikings breached its walls and sacked the city. The death of the imperial family, including the emperor himself, as well as many, many daimyo and countless warriors, lying lifeless in the Vikings' warpath. Eventually, however, the Vikings began to be pushed back, as the samurai united under the once banished daimyo Ayu, who led them in a massive counteroffensive of guerrilla warfare that saw the Vikings flee with their loot back to their home in Valkenheim. After the Great Raid, for nearly a full year, the area would become a lawless landscape as bandits and thieves pillaged, looted, and murdered as they pleased. A new clan, the Hado, who were loyal vassals of the Oyamatsu for generations, and who are loyal to the new Empress Ayu, would move into the former Oyamatsu residence and taking ownership of the settlement in the name of their masters. They would crack down relentlessly on lawlessness while trying to rebuild Yamamachi, and eventually, after a hard year of work, they would regain full control of the region. For a time, As preparations were made to lead the armies of the samurai against Apollyon and her Blackstone Legion knights in Ashfield, the region began to flourish once more. However, soon people began to appear before the clan head, Hado Ryoketsu, and they told him of a terrifying tale that had persisted in the area since the time of the Viking invasion. Travelers who had climbed the mountains had begun mysteriously vanishing. While this wasn't a problem at first, considering how treacherous the path across the mountains was, it wasn't until people like experienced merchants and journeyers who knew the roads well began to disappear that fear began to spread throughout the region. Many people at first assumed it was probably crawling with bandits because of the year that they had been in charge of the region. However, as search parties were sent, they found people's belongings still intact. But they could only find severed pieces of people, like hands, legs, arms, and sometimes heads mounted on pikes, in a brutal display of cruelty and brutality. Some people said that the ghost of a corrupt monk who died on a pilgrimage haunted the mountainside and killed people for their souls. Others said that the vengeful spirit of a fallen samurai resided there and killed all who entered it in order to satiate its eternal bloodlust. Some groups of people would begin to travel and help protect one another. Yet even still, people went missing, as people would look away for just a moment, only to turn around and find people missing, both during the day and in the night. And those few fortunate souls who did return from the mountains would claim that sometimes, in the dead of night, a blood-curdling scream would echo in the dark, frigid night. One day, despite opposition from his people, Lord Ryuketsu set off for the mountains alone to see if these tales were indeed true. Climbing the rough and uneven terrain, he began to get high enough that snow began to fall and covered the ground in a thick white blanket. After a long period of walking, Ryuketsu built a quinzhee out of snow just off to the side of the traveled road and let it sit to solidify as he built a small campfire. After several hours of waiting, his shelter had hardened, and using his hunting knife he began to hollow out the shelter as night quickly approached. As the sun finally set, he finished his shelter. Cold air, eerie silence, and dark shadows engulfed the area as night fell, with only the campfire providing light and warmth for the Lord. Suddenly, a chilling cry pierced through the dark night, startling Ryuketsu, who drew his katana in self-defense, quickly scanning his surroundings before facing the direction he heard the scream originate. Looking back at his camp, he began to make his way in the direction of the sound, the bitter wind whistling through the trees and stinging his face as he made his way higher through the darkness, with nothing but the moonlight now illuminating the land. Reaching the top of the mountain, he stops as he stands before an old and abandoned monastery. Its pagoda tower, while in ruins, was still standing like an old shrine that had been long forgotten. The moon, hanging high in the night sky like a papered lantern, cast dark shadows of the structure on the land, and no lights came from within the abandoned structure. The wind continued to blow eerily against the trees as Ryuketsu, katana still drawn, slowly began to explore the ruins. He came across many rooms, kitchens, living quarters, prayer rooms, chambers, and other facilities that long ago may have been full of life and activity, but now were silent and dark, with not even a mouse or any other sign of life in sight. And yet, he still felt that he was being watched. No, not watched, he thought. Stalked. like a predator stalks its prey during a hunt. Slowly, Ryuketsu moved into a courtyard in the center of the ruins. Despite its apparent lack of life, the ruins seemed to hold a strange aura, unseen but certainly felt, that resonated throughout its very foundations. Not like how ruins feel alone and abandoned, but rather like some malicious and depraved tragedy had once occurred here long ago, only to be forgotten with time. Suddenly, a foreboding sense of danger surrounded him as the sound of footsteps came rushing towards him from behind. Ryuketsu spun around, just barely in time to deflect a blow from the side as a large blade struck at him, its long edge just barely cutting at his armored sleeve. After recovering his stance, he faced his attacker, only to have his eyes open wide as the shock of the sight before him ran through his entire body. Before him stood a bloody and demonic Kensei, mangled and damaged in both mind and body. His armor was covered in scratch marks and open gashes from axe wounds, blood running down and coating the tar black metal of his armor. His sword, covered in blood, chipped and showing signs of extensive use and disrepair. The face mask, ripped apart with blood oozing between the teeth of someone who now no longer looked human. His eyes, black, with a gleaming red iris, as an aura of bloodlust and unbridled madness seeped from within him. Despite the layers he wore over his armor, Ryuketsu still felt chilled to the very bone. It was as if what remaining warmth would have been left in the winter air itself had disappeared, to be replaced by nothing but the bitter cold of death's embrace. Ryuketsu began to look more intensely at this being's armor. It was difficult to see because of the amount of blood, but the armor was definitely red, black, and white, with the Jimbari overcoat having a fish scale-like design on the back. A white and black flower design on the Hayate thigh guards and left Sode shoulder guards, with a weaved embossing pattern on the Hayate as well as the right Sode in a asymmetric manner. But the most recognizable parts were the dragon and tiger embossing on the glossy black doe chest piece, and the white bear fur kabuto helmet with two spiked horns protruding from the top and a guardian tiger ornament on the front. Below that helmet, the black Menpo face mask, mangled beyond repair with white facial hair. Only this time, on the back of the overcoat, on top of this fish scale design, was that of an almost demonic samurai, bearing a sword in his teeth. "Oyamatsu Fuyuhiko, is that really you?" Ryuketsu asked. No response came as the Kensei stood there in a trance, its hand still clenching the Nodachi with an iron grip. "It's me, Hadao Ryuketsu. Everyone thought you and your family died from the Viking invasion a year ago, my lord. I am ecstatic to see you still alive, but those injuries do not bode well for you." Still, no response came. "We need to bring you back to Yamamachi, my lord, so you can receive proper treatment. Your makeshift bandages would have been fine for a couple days, but it looks like you haven't changed them in quite some time. If we don't replace them soon, your wounds will get infected, my lord, if they haven't already." The man remained still in eerie silence. Ryuketsu slowly began to move closer to Fuyuhiko, moving with great care as he grew closer to the man before him. However, Fuyuhiko's hand suddenly twitched, stopping Ryuketsu dead in his tracks. "Lord Fuyuhiko, are you there?" Ryuketsu asked. Suddenly, Fuyuhiko made a thunderous roar and grabbed his Nodachi, swinging down hard with it. Ryuketsu tried blocking with his sword, but was brought down to one knee by the sheer force of Fuyuhiko's strike, which, considering his injuries, should not have been physically possible. Lord Fuyuhiko, stop! It is I! Ryuketsu pleaded, only to receive animalistic growls as an answer. Moving his arm swiftly to the left side, Ryuketsu used his sword to guide Fuyuhiko's blade, which slid down it and struck into the ground beneath them. Fuyuhiko then redirected his strike as Ryuketsu stood up on his feet and dodged the blade once more. What are you doing? Control yourself, my lord, Ryuketsu said as he parried another attack. I do not know what is going on with you, but you are coming with me, Lord Fuyuhiko, now. Ryuketsu shouted as he kept evading and parrying Fuyuhiko's attacks, which, while they were powerful and fast, seemed frantic and devoid of proper technique. You leave me no choice. I will make this quick, my friend, Ryuketsu said as he jumped backwards, putting his katana in a reverse grip and putting it behind his back before rushing at Fuyuhiko. The possessed Kensei attempted to strike from above again, but before hitting him, Ryuketsu dodged to the left and with one swift motion slid on the ground and, spinning his blade, slashed the back of Fuyuhiko's knees. Blood dripping onto the ground from the wound as Fuyuhiko fell onto his knees into the muddy, wet snow. Before he could make another move, Ryuketsu kicked the Nodachi out of his hands as it fell into the snow. Ryuketsu wiped the blood off his blade and faced his incapacitated friend, who looked up at him with a face full of fury that was not his own. Ryuketsu took a step forward, with his blade ready, before slamming its pommel into the back of Fuyuhiko's neck. The Kensei's body, unable to take any more damage, went limp as the possessed lord fell unconscious into the frigid snow. Fuyuhiko awoke, lying down in a futon inside a comfortable, warm, and dimly lit room. Although his eyes were able to move despite feeling sore and being cloudy of vision, his body experienced searing pain at even the slightest movement. A man and woman who were above him, seemingly attending to him, jolted in surprise as he opened his eyes. The man quickly got up and rushed out of the room as the woman began to check on him feverishly. Young master, how are you feeling? The woman asked, a conflicting mixture of concern and joy on her face. Where am I? What happened? Fuyuhiko responded weakly, his voice full of pain and confusion, his eyes able to open, but his vision was still heavily blurred and impaired. You are currently in the Oyamatsu estate, my lord, the woman said gently. Lord Hado and some of his men brought you down from the mountain in a cart. You were in such a horrific state. Many thought that you were but a corpse, and couldn't believe it when Lord Hado said who you were, and that you were alive. That voice. Are you? Before Fuyuhiko could finish, the paper door opened once more as more people entered into the room. Ayane, how is he? A man said. Oh, Lord Hado, thank goodness you're here. Lord Oyamatsu has just awoken, Ayane said. Ayane, Fuyuhiko stated. You were my mother's head maid, correct? I'm honored that you still remember me, a humble house servant, young master, Ayane responded, a smile across her face. Fuyuhiko then strained his eyes to Ryuketsu. Is this man Lord Hado? Indeed I am. I must first apologize for what happened. I was with my family in the capital, and we weren't able to help you in your battle against the Vikings. Nor were we able to arrive in time to save Yamamachi from burning down to the ground, Ryuketsu said, a somber expression, sitting alongside Ayane at Fuyuhiko's bedside. My lord, if I may ask, what was the last thing that you remember? Fuyuhiko looked at the ceiling in a cloudy thought. before answering. Yamamachi was burning. Our soldiers and people were dead in the streets. I ran out of the town alone and escaped. The Vikings arrived in larger numbers as I ran for the mountain. I then arrived at a ruined temple, and my body ached. My head felt like it was about to burst before suddenly everything went dark. Ryuketsu and Ayane looked at each other with deeply concerned looks on their faces before returning their gaze to Fuyuhiko. My lord, there is quite a lot you must come to know, Ryuketsu said grimly. It has been 2 weeks since we brought you back here, my lord. That Viking invasion was but a year ago. Has it ended? Fuyuhiko said, his eyes open as much as they possibly could. Yes, my lord, it has ended. But only after they killed the entire imperial family and sacked the capital. The daimyo Seijuro was installed by the knight Apollyon, the leader of the Blackstones from Ashfeld, who rushed towards the imperial palace as the Vikings began to retreat. The daimyo Ayu, who was banished by the former emperor, freed the emperor's champion from his prison in the capital, and then killed all of the other rival daimyo before leading a united assault against the imperial palace itself, where she would capture and recruit Seijuro to her ranks. She now rules as Empress of the Mire. Even as we speak, all of our people are mustering their forces for an invasion of Ashfeld to take vengeance against Apollyon and the Blackstone Legion. I see. Do you know when the invasion will start? Also, is there a possibility that I may speak with the Empress? Fuyuhiko said, turning his head slightly towards the pair, his coughs hurting his very chest. I will not pretend to know when the invasion will commence, my lord. But I think before anything is considered, you should rest and stay here until you are well enough to make the trip to the Imperial Palace. If you'll excuse me, my lord, I must go give a message to the financial inspector before he returns to the Imperial capital. It will be informing the Imperial Palace of your survival, my lord. With that, Ryuketsu stood up and bowed to Fuyuhiko and began to make his way towards the door. My lord, you mustn't move right now, Ayane said. Ryuketsu turned back before he passed through the door to see Fuyuhiko, despite the screaming pain his body was in, and his struggled breaths. And Ayane's insistence. He lifted his body up so that he was in a sitting position on the floor. Thank you, Lord Hado. You have my deepest gratitude, Fuyuhiko said as he lowered his head. Lord Hado nodded and walked out of the room as Ayane helped Fuyuhiko lay back down on the floor. After half a year of recovery and treatment, Fuyuhiko made enough of a recovery that he was able to once again wield a sword for the first time in months. And soon, now clad in his newly repaired armor, alongside Hado Ryuketsu and their entourages, both clan banners carried aloft by their guards, the two made their way to the Imperial Palace. Dismounting their horses, Ryuketsu and Fuyuhiko were escorted by the Imperial Guard into the main chamber of the palace itself. Entering into the divine throne room, many lords and ladies from across the mire had been gathered. The two knelt upon the floor in line with their contemporaries before the throne, and the doors opened as guards entered the chamber. Presenting Empress of the Mire, Her Majesty Empress Ayu, a guard announced to the chamber. Every one of the lords prostrated themselves onto the floor as Empress Ayu and her samurai retainers entered into the room. Her retainers, which included the Emperor's champion, positioned themselves across and around the throne, as Ayu herself sat upon the imperial seat of power, facing all of the lords of the mire. Our preparations are still underway for the invasion of Ashfeld. We will need all the manpower we can muster if this is to succeed. We have found that Apollyon of the Blackstone Legion is responsible for driving the Vikings into our land, murdering the imperial family. I have summoned everyone here to hear of what your contributions to this effort will be, she stated, her voice echoing in the chamber. All the lords raised their heads as they looked around. The hall, which had once been crowded with many great lords on both, now seemed eerily empty, with no lords no longer on the second balcony or the first balcony. All lords were only on the main floor with the throne, a fraction of their former numbers. Many of their domains had been attacked, with few coming out of the Great Raid unscathed. Lady Masura, 1,200. Lord Takanori, 681. Lord Ujimaru, 2,164. Lords and ladies, one after another, pledged what soldiers they could spare to the main imperial army, as Ayu called upon them. Scribes furiously recorded numbers, and remaining members of the imperial court were left muttered amongst themselves against their contemporaries. Finally, the Empress turned and called upon Ryuketsu. Lord Hado, how many troops could you spare? She asked. Your Majesty, I can spare 400 men, but I would like to only deploy them under the command of Lord Oyamatsu, Ryuketsu said as he turned to Fuyuhiko, his lord. My lord, our family has served as your loyal vassals for generations. My clan took control of Yamamachi only because we thought you and your entire family were all killed during the Great Raid. However, since you are still alive, you are still the true ruler of Yamamachi and its surrounding region. We will follow wherever you go, my lord. Merely say the word, and we shall be by your side once more. Ryuketsu bowed his head to Fuyuhiko, who, still stunned, turned to face the Empress. Well then, Lord Oyamatsu, will you join us? Ayo asked, as all eyes in the chamber turned to Fuyuhiko. Fuyuhiko's mind was racing, as everyone awaited his answer. His mind went to his people, the mire, the great raid, his home, and then to his slaughtered family. All of his hatred, immediately after his return from the invasion, had been solely on the Vikings. But now, he had a name to pin the blame of his suffering. Apollyon. He didn't care who it was. All he needed was someone to seek vengeance for the death of his family and the despoilment of his home. He made up his mind, his fist clenching in his lap as he looked back up towards the Empress. Your Majesty, I must first apologize for not being able to assist in the invasion. My family had gone to meet the attackers on the field, but they were wiped out by the Vikings, and I alone am the sole survivor of my house. As of right now, I do not feel that my troops are at their full readiness. On top of that, I am still unsure if the Vikings are truly gone, and wonder if they may still launch another attack into the mire. Your Imperial Majesty, please allow me and my men to return to my province on the border. We will continue amassing and training more troops. And I swear, upon my honor and the honor of my clan, when you give the imperial decree, we will be there to join the imperial army in Ashfeld to seek vengeance against the Blackstone Legion and Apollyon. Fuyuhiko bowed till his head touched the floor, and with Ryuketsu following shortly after his lord. The Empress turned to her entourage as they quietly discussed the matter. After several excruciating minutes of discussion, the party dispersed back to their places in the Imperial chamber. Several painfully quiet moments would pass until the Empress finally spoke. Very well, Lord Fuyuhiko. You will gather your forces in your domain in preparation for the planned invasion. When the time comes and the decree is made, I will expect you and your troops to be with us in Ashfeld, under the penalty of death. Thank you, Your Imperial Majesty. I will see to it that the task is done, and my troops will be with you and the rest of our people on the warpath. After the council, all the lords were led out of the chamber and brought to their quarters for the night in the castle. Later that evening, Fuyuhiko was outside on the balcony, looking outside of his room at the vast expanse of the mire before him, knowing that out beyond it lay the Viking territory of Valkenheim and the knight's home of Ashfeld. Apollyon, you and your Blackstone Legion will regret the day you came here and despoiled and defiled our home. Like a storm, we will sweep across your land, coming for you relentlessly, and we will not stop until we have your head and all those who serve you. This, I swear, from my family, and for all the people of the mire. You will not escape justice. We will be victorious. A figure stood silently in the corner of the room, its gleaming white hair shining in the moonlight. Tattered and worn cloth that may have once been clothing shrouded the being's body, its pale and wrinkled skin wrapped around a thin and frail frame with little to no muscle underneath it. Its face, wrinkled like the rest of its body, would have resembled what would have been an ordinary elderly man, were it not for its razor-sharp teeth and its spiked horns that protruded from its head. Nails were long and horribly unkempt, while both of its eyes were a foreboding pitch-black color, with only red irises to show where it was looking. Its eyes fixed on Fuyuhiko as it kept to the shadow, staring, waiting. Yakusatsu.